Hey everyone, I'm Megan with AbelCine. Thanks for joining us today. And with me today is a great group of panelists. This subject this morning is branded content. Now that's a term, a lot, buzzword basically that we've been hearing a lot. So we're going to, talk through that, define it, and about all of our different roles and the creative intent of different types of productions. So I'm really lucky to have amazing panelists with me this morning. Thanks for joining me, you guys.
Thanks.
So just to introduce my panelists here, starting with Evan. Evan Bourcier is an award-winning DP. He's based out of Western Massachusetts, specializing in naturalistic modern cinematography, working with ESPN, Facebook, Warner Music Group, and Nathan's Hot Dogs. I loved that you had Nathan's Hot Dogs in there.
Dude, you gotta throw the food in there.
Yeah. Thanks, Evan, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Next to Evan is Chris Grubisa. Chris Grubisa is the president and executive creative director of Chrilleks Productions. I've got a couple of notes here about Chris to get to know him better. He's graduated high honors with the Media Arts program at Sheridan College Institute of Technology and advanced learning, specializing in cinematography and editing. You worked 2 jobs when you first started, right? Camera prep technician as well as a camera assistant.
Correct.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit, how you got into this. Next to me here also is Nicholas. Nicholas Schrunk is the creative director from Red Bull Media House. Nicholas is an award-winning director specializing in action and adventure sports. He's directed top athletic talent across all professional and action sports with a formal education in biology and design, which is really cool. Cool background. Okay, so just to get to know you guys a little bit better, I went through a couple intros here, but why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you do specifically? What you do specifically.
Does that make me first?
Yes.
Okay. I do a few things. I feel like we all end up wearing multiple hats a lot of the time nowadays. But I mostly get paid to be a DP for other people's productions. But I sort of started out running my own small production company and doing stuff direct to client. I've done a lot of work in music and sports lately, kind of in that whole world. But I also have a podcast and a YouTube channel and a blog and just a whole other sort of film education side of things. But I mostly just make pretty pictures for people.
That sounds great. All right, Chris, how about you?
I run Chrilleks Productions, Inc. I'm the main shooter, the creative director, kind of wear, again, multiple hats. We work directly with clients as well, Red Bulls, Mountain Dews, action sport oriented, as well as just lifestyle products as well. We're doing cosmetics coming up, so it's good to be well-rounded in every sort of way, and we just produce social content for the brands. And agency work as well, direct to client, and videos.
Wide range, it sounds like. Wide range.
Yeah. I feel like we need to have energy drinks now. Like with our target markets, what we work, we shouldn't have water.
Nicholas, how about you?
I'm the creative director at Red Bull Media House, and Red Bull Media House was started in 2007 in Salzburg, Austria, as part of Red Bull Energy Drink. And we now create content across 160 countries worldwide, with everything from lifestyle, culture, and then, of course, sports production. And not only do we, create content around like the playgrounds that, Red Bull athletes and the Red Bull brand is in, but we also license our content out and partner with other brands on specific initiatives for them. So I'm the creative director, so I look over the creative of all the content that comes out, and then on occasion go and actually direct and produce in the field as well.
Sounds like all of you have to multitask every moment.
Basically.
Oh, yeah.
So I just wanted to touch a little bit more on your backgrounds. Nicholas, you have a science and design background, so how did you get into this industry?
I grew up in Iowa, went to college there, and that was right around 2007, 2008 that I was graduating. That was right when the big transition was starting to go from film to digital. The cameras were starting to come down in price, but it was the Wild West out there. So I was a design major, so software and digital was my background. So it really started as a way of I'm willing to engage in this world where a lot of people weren't, and that's how I got a lot of my early opportunities. A lot of it's technical and figuring it out, especially back then, because there wasn't easily accessible information that you would find online. You were figuring it out yourself. So I just combined that with my love of sports and adventure and outdoors and started working my way and ended up here.
I think it really speaks to a technical background and a creative intent at the same time, right? You're kind of constantly balancing those perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, the craft is important to filmmaking. And so you can have ideas and you have great stories that you want to tell, but when you're starting out and you're young and you've got to figure it all out yourself, and then you choose to specialize as you work through your career.
Now, Chris, tell me about your background a little bit. So you worked at a rental house. I actually did that as well. I worked as a camera technician.
Nice.
And then as an AC. So how did you go from that to joining your own company or creating your own company?
The honest answer is, honestly, it became more of a job, and it's like, it just became more of a job, and it wasn't fulfilling, to be honest. And and I say we all the time because myself and Alex, my partner, we worked up together. And it just, there was lack of creativity, there was, the fulfillment just wasn't there. And it was, we just wanted more fun in terms of like working with clients as well, and just going out there and actually, creating the work. So from AC to shooting to learning, it's the whole picture, so.
And Evan, how about you? I know you also mentioned you do some directing and DP work as well. So how did you, know that you wanted to do this?
Yeah, I sort of fell into filmmaking very much, where I came from like a graphic design background and thought that that's what I was going to do, and just started like playing around with iPhone videos, and then sort of rode the DSLR wave. And now I'm here, and it's sort of just been like it starts out with just you see cool stuff and want to make cool stuff, in your basement or wherever you are, and then the path of like, I would like to make better stuff, or I'd like to get paid, and you just sort of wiggle your way through, and and wherever I am now with that, just continuing to sort of figure out where you're going. But I think that's where I come from, that background of starting off having done everything and having been a producer and a director and a sound engineer and a DP and a, everything, and over time moved to managing direct-to-client stuff and then hiring other people. And then honestly, I think currently I'm at the point where I've realized that it's just like the most valuable asset that I provide to a project is either directing or DPing, and I'd rather let other people handle the rest of that. And so that's really my focus now. And I'm still at the tension of like picking just one, so I do both, but I'd mostly make pretty pictures.
Right, nice. I feel you there. Okay, so we wanted to talk about branded content, right? And I said earlier it's a term that I find is thrown around a lot. Even just a minute ago we were saying, okay, what's our angle on branded content? So I actually did a little bit of research, and I found a definition here, and I wanted to hear kind of what all three of you think. I found this in Adweek. And the statement is, commercials are to tell the audience what your product does, right? If it's done correctly, branded entertainment tells your audience what your brand stands for. And I thought that was a really interesting, short definition. And as I've looked more and more into branded content, the concept being that you want to basically relate with your audience, right? Get the emotion started with your audience so that they remember. And it's not about necessarily the brand being as present as it maybe was in the past, recent past, right? So, Nicholas, what do you when you hear the term branded content, what does that term mean for you?
Well, I think it's important to distinguish the idea of, what a commercial endeavor is versus what branded content is. Because to me, it's just a difference of just the first step of the creative process. So a commercial, you start with a product, or you could start with a brand, but it's usually a specific thing that you're trying to sell, and then the story is kind of derived from that. And there's some amazing stories that you can tell visually that way. To me, branded content is you start with a story that's genuine and authentic to the space that you want to be. So for instance, in my world, and also in Evan and Chris's world, in sports, it usually starts with an athlete's idea or progression of a sport or an environment or place that's desirable to go to. And from there, we start, our story and start building the production. And then as we go through it, for us at Red Bull Media House, the integration is natural. We want to give ideas to people, ideas to what they want to do. So the integration's natural, but even across all the other brands, you start with, a core story that's, desirable in like the playground in the world you want to go to. And then you find integrations that support that story as opposed to finding the story that supports the integrations.
I really like the concept of you start with what you want to say versus what you're supposed to say, right? Yeah.
100%, yeah. And then I guess like you nailed it for sure. And we come in with different platforms. So you can go from story mode on your Insta stories to Snapchat, and you just pull from that, essentially the hero video or the main idea, and then just content gets pulled. Yeah.
I mean, I think that pretty much sums it up. I think in my mind, there's still a little bit of a tie of like, I don't know that I've ever seen a really solid 30-second branded content piece on broadcast, Like, I feel like there's still a format distinction, and I think that it comes from that, like, story-first attitude, maybe, of just, like, it's really hard to tell a really compelling story that's not really product first in 30 seconds. I'm sure it's doable, but I think that it tends to naturally skew towards some of those different platforms of, web-based content and, a lot of the stuff that Red Bull's done of just like, we're just going to make 5 minutes of insanity and there's a Red Bull logo at the end,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's just another little piece of it for me is giving yourself the time and the format to be able to tell that story as opposed to like broadcast, we have a lot of eyes, but we have to convert our sales pitch really quickly, and branded content tends to live somewhere that people can enjoy that message and enjoy that story and not have to get sold to right away.
Well, I think our viewing platforms too have changed so much and evolved even the past 4 or 5 years, right? And so earlier we were chatting, we were talking about how you have to stay current by making your own content, even if you are a traditional production company. So Chris, maybe you could touch on that. I know you work with brands as well as agencies as well as creating your own. So how do you diversify like that?
So like just what I was saying before, the fulfillment, it's I mean, we're working with big brands, and we've excelled greatly because of Red Bull's working closely with them. And we just take little bits and pieces here and there, from I don't even know, proposals to how they execute, how they hashtag, how they retarget. So it's just pretty much said, it's just, you just take and take and take, and
I think
apply it.
I think the thing that I would add to sort of what I feel like you're saying is that when you're trying to live in that space of producing branded content, your goal is we're trying to sell this story or tell this story and attach a brand to it. And creating personal work gives you the opportunity to put out like, this is the kind of story I want to tell and this is how I want to tell it. And so then brands are able to connect with that work and say like, hey, we want to tell this story, but we want ourselves, put into it. And so I feel like that's where creating your own content can be very important to putting forth your vision as a storyteller more so than as a production company that is a tool to make the images we need to sell the product, because there is so much more deep of a like personal connection to the story that you're telling, and so that like personal sensibility of storytelling becomes much more important, I think.
I also read something this morning about how you want to create a ripple effect with your content, and I wondered if you'd heard that term before, versus creating one piece that exists by itself. So you create this ripple effect, especially through social media and all of the different platforms that we have today. I think about Red Bull. Red Bull is such a big company with many different departments, right? I know they sponsor, film festivals and fashion weeks and things like that. So how do they, diversify and still create such high-end content like that?
Well, I think you have to kind of look across all the platforms, and by no means is anyone up here or anyone doing branded content only going to work in 30-second commercials or social media. We're all doing everything. We wear all the hats. So I think it's important that you look across all the channels with what you're making. And the ripple effect is just really trying to capture the largest amount of consumers. I think the one thing that's pertinent to that is that consumers are a lot smarter these days. People that consume content don't have a barrier of what makes it on TV and what doesn't. I have the ability to go online with my smartphone, and while there is curated content that an algorithm will send to the top, for the most part, I'm in control with what I consume. But I think that also on the other side of that, that's helpful for brands, is you don't need a big bad shot in it. You don't need a big logo. You don't need that gratuitous branded shot in your content. I think consumers are getting smarter so that if I see something on YouTube and then I see it on a Facebook feed, and then there's an Instagram story from that brand that comes out, and then maybe I do see a traditional spot on TV, I'm going to make those connections, and I don't need a URL or a brand in my face. And I think as content creators, that's refreshing, and there's a lot that we can do with that, so that we're not tied down to what's the bad shot and then everything else.
It gets you creative on a different level, how to think outside the box, essentially. And just kind of what the template was, it's totally broken now. totally.
I was going to say, to your point about consumers being smarter, I think it's also, we know when we're being sold to, and now I don't think that works anymore. And it maybe, it did for traditional broadcast commercials before. But now, we know when we're being sold to and we move on. When you hear that.
It could be as easy as, if you're jumping off something and it's a hashtag. Like it could just be like a little thing at the bottom of the caption, not even the images or the content that's actually being shown, right down to the comments or something like that. So, there's so many there's platforms, but there's also avenues in those platforms as well. So it's like, it could be anything and everything these days. So you kind of got to watch all the little details.
And you already touched on this actually a minute ago about the length of different content that you're creating, right? So I found a quote that you said, Chris, that says 30 seconds feels like an eternity for us.
A little bit, yeah. I don't want to kibosh that too, because if you start doing series work or jumping into a 5-minute, a good solid meat and potatoes piece, those are always, executed as well. And I think there's a spot for everybody in this space in the media world. There's coming down to photography, to GIFs, to anything and everything. Effects to. So there's just it's I take Insta stories as serious as I do for a 2-minute piece, because it's still content out in the world. People can still relate from it or grab something from it, inspiring or not, and or sellability, if that's even a word. And so it's just every piece of content, even down to the Snapchats. So.
Yeah, I've worked on projects where the deliverable is Instagram, and so we frame for Instagram. That's our intent, and obviously they share it beyond that as well. But it's interesting that that's your, that can be your intent. Yeah,
and we take it very seriously in terms of it's our resume, because it's, hey, I just met you, NAB, check my Instagram, boom, sees your work in two thumb swipes. So you kind of gotta take it seriously. And then there's a whole Snapchat thing. It kind of disappears within 24 hours, but still, it's up there, and you never know.
You're seen. People see you.
Exactly, yeah.
So to the point about, different lengths of content, we see things that are seconds long, 30 seconds long, and then, Evan, we were talking about longer pieces. We also have the opportunity to have 1-minute, 2-minute pieces. It sounds like you like to work in the longer, pieces as well. So touch on that.
Yeah, I think it really just depends on, what your goal is. I think just for me personally, a lot of the work that we've ended up doing, you need that time to develop that story to really create engagement with your viewer. There's certain stuff that's great in 5, 10, 15 seconds, whatever it may be. But then there's a lot of other stuff that you just need that time to develop your characters and develop that engagement with. And, I remember some of the content that really stood out to me at one point was a lot of the longer format snowboarding stuff that Red Bull and Brain Farm and people were doing. And it's feature length, branded content on a certain level. And I think that can be really valuable if that's the story that you're trying to tell, but it really just comes down to that, what is this story and what's the best format for it? If we want to engage with this snowboarder as a person, maybe we need a feature to really know him as a person. If we want to engage with this crazy triple cork in a, pipe at the Olympics, we only need an Instagram story for that. You really have to tailor your platform to the story, and then you can subdivide, maybe you have a feature, but hey, there are these moments that we can cut into stories, and this can go to YouTube, and this can go to whatever, and so you're sort of building this tree of big content and then all the little content that you can disperse out to sort of create that ripple effect. But sometimes you only need 15 seconds to say what you're trying to say.
I was just going to ask, how do you engage your audience that quickly then? If you have 15 seconds, you have to say everything you want to say in 15 seconds.
You just jump out of space.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that's one of the first examples that I think of, because that was one of the first things that I saw of a GoPro, in an amazing situation. So, Nicholas.
Well, it's, it's like everything. It's are we making this just for an Instagram story? Is it something that it's just a never-before-seen trick that takes 7 seconds and that's all we need to see? Or is this a longer format piece where the storytelling is really what rises to the top, but we need something for the platform? So it's what's the little bit that we pull out of it? And, if I had an answer for you, everyone would do it. It changes for every project. Yeah. And to be totally honest, some of the hardest edits that we have to do are for Instagram, because it's how do we pull something that's 6 minutes long or 22 minutes long down to just the bare minimum and what communicates that idea the fastest. Usually it's some type of spectacle or trick or something that's not character driven, but sometimes it can be. I mean, look at your friends on social media, they're characterizing themselves, and that's not branded content, that's just them putting their personality forward. So it really is complex, but it's always, what is that one little bite-sized piece that someone's going to remember, and them remembering it might cause them later, with this whole idea of going across all media, to click on a Facebook link or to click on a YouTube link. And that's really kind of the goal, is continued engagement with that brand, because they're invested and they want to know more, not necessarily I got my satisfaction from a very short clip.
Well, and I think there's sort of one thing that you touched on there is like when you have your friends are like sharing a status or a picture or whatever it is, and we can, I think, easily view the narrative in like the sort of micro content of like this is the post, but there's sort of a macro narrative of like the ongoing feed as well, of like we're building an engagement and a narrative over the course of maybe a week of 15-second videos at this event or something, or whatever it may be, that it sometimes it is that like this thing is our narrative, and sometimes it's all these little pieces put together are developing our ongoing engagement with someone, where they're going to want to come back and learn more in these little bite-sized chunks.
So there's a strategy, like a deliverable strategy.
Yeah.
It's just another challenge, because you have to take 5-minute piece and narrow the best shots in a 15 seconds. So, but it's also a learning experience for young guys like ourselves, and we just. It's like the elevator pitch. You kind of do a 15-second, like you have to say everything you need to say in 15 seconds and go.
Right.
And then Instagram kind of like broke that window or that box, because they now allow a minute. So it's like it opened it up a bit, but it teaches on a whole new level for a new generation, essentially. So. And
just to complicate that even more, Chris is probably going to say next, is a lot of people watch social media without sound. So now take half of the experience away.
100%.
And so it's like, what can get by without sound? Do you caption it? Do you find another solution? So it's not just, what am I going to cram into this? Because what you're seeing is a person that's going through their potpourri on their phone. And so it's like they might only have half of their senses and half of your attention while they're driving through traffic or whatever. So what's the thing that they're going to remember?
So in pre-production, that's something you consider, is what you're saying. Like that you consider that your audience may not be listening to this with sound. So how do I, still get the message across?
Yeah, I mean, whatever the project, if it's big and this is just one little bit that the marketing department wants, or if this is truly a social campaign that's built around a character or whatever, we weren't doing this a few years ago, but now, as the platforms have advanced and the analytics are better, we know what performs and what does well. So now we're able to, hit more of a target. And we're finding out that target is just becoming more and more specific of what you're actually going to get. It's really interesting and fun. It's also incredibly infuriating for a filmmaker, especially visual guys that want everyone to watch it in 4K full screen with headphones. Now we're going for something that's 600 pixels wide with no sound. It's challenging.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend the other day. We were watching a few things on YouTube, and we were like, the biggest thing that would be a game changer at NAB is actually just better compression or better internet. That's the struggle. When you watch something on YouTube and the banding is just like so bad, and you're like, this was shot on Panavision, but it still looks like garbage by the time it gets to me,
Yeah, out of the whole kerfuffle of branded content, get the shot, because at the end of the day, that's what matters, and then just take it and reformat it.
I think another thing that's always interesting to me, though, is I don't feel like these are necessarily new problems. I think they're the same problems on new platforms. Like, these are the same problems that, like, broadcast has been dealing with for a long time, where it's like, okay, we have, X big piece of content, and now we have to, cut down little teases that are going to go different places to drive people to engage with this. And so the platform's different, but it's not really, like, a totally new thing, It's the same idea of, like, how are we going to put these little things out where people are going to easily consume them to drive them to our money-making content or whatever it may be, and so it's fun to get to play in a new space, but I think that there's sort of a lot that you can actually learn from looking at the way that people have traditionally done that, because there is stuff that worked, and I think the biggest thing that changes is you can be so much more specific about your audience now than you were before, where we can go on Facebook and we can drive this edit to 15 to 25-year-old dudes who drive a Subaru, and this is who's going to watch this, whereas if it's playing on ESPN, it's a whole lot broader than that, and so you can't be that specific, and And so it can be a challenge and a struggle, but it's also cool when you get to know your audience that well, you know, and it's fun to do something that this is for a very specific group of people, as opposed to like, I mean, and it's still fun, but we've been shooting the intro, the like sizzle for the open of the NFL draft tomorrow, and it's like, it'll be cool, but it's just a very broad audience kind of thing, you know, where it's like, it has to look like everything on ESPN, you know, you can't get too off the reservoir, whereas if it's an Instagram story, a lot of the time you have a whole lot more room to play around in my experience.
So let's talk about technology for a second. A couple of you mentioned that already. You know, a lot obviously has changed also since probably all of you started your careers as well. So what's something that, you know, technology is allowing you to do now that you couldn't do, you know, even a year or 2 years ago?
Well, just to start, I think like camera movement and the control that you have over it is just unbelievable. And with that, you know, which I think we would all agree is just how everything has become smaller, lighter, and more compact. So, you know, a lot of the productions and the sports that we shoot, you know, are by nature a small team production. And when you have a small team, you have two big needs. One, you need everything light and durable, because there's no opportunity to bring extra because there's not extra hands, it's not extra bodies, and a lot of that's just the environments that we go into, you know, some of the extreme environments, or just, you know, the access. You just can't bring a studio to do a lot of these things in the environments that we do. So when you look at things like the Free Fly Movie, when that came on the scene, you know, thinking about what it would take to put together, you know, a stable shot, even just tracking with two people talking before and now, and what that, you know, it's even in the last 2 years, it's, you know, 3 big Pelican cases and someone that had to troubleshoot. Now, you know, the DP is probably able to operate, you know, all of the gimbals and all of the camera support himself, because it's just all the kinks have been worked out. It's small, the budgets, you know, for acquiring those things are lower, so a lot more productions have opportunities to use them. And I think that's just like one of the most phenomenal things for storytelling, because now you have total control over the movement of the camera.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned things keeping small and lightweight, and I think a couple years ago, those weren't the high-end cameras that you had to use. You know, now it's like high-end cameras are getting smaller and lighter, and you can still keep, you know, the high quality up there.
I have an Amira, so it's not that small.
I mean, we're all working in kind of this quasi-documentary type space, you know, making these stories. So, you know, like the DSLR cameras, when they came on the scene in 2008 and they were good enough to use, you know, were a godsend, but they came with their troubles of usability and integrating into professional productions. Now it's like you have cameras that are that big or slightly bigger, that now you're packing, you know, 6K, 8K resolution into dynamic range, low light capabilities, and you're really just saying this one camera can do more things and this camera is smaller. So for small team shooting, I mean, it's just revolutionizing how we're like documenting sports.
For sure, and that's, I mean, not to say our company's small, but we're just versatile, because it's, I mean, you're a studio in a bag. I can literally carry audio, camera right on my bag, multiple GoPro if I want to do DSLR A7Ss and all that, throw everything in a bag and you can do it with a laptop, even to a DIT station. Like, it's insane. LED lights, like I have hot lights at home and I'm like, I don't know, I want to use, you know, LEDs right now. So I think one of the coolest things with the resolution, with, you know, shrinking it down to a cell phone, is that you can just shoot for like the hero video, like a 16:9 piece, like it would be on broadcast, or you can go in and crop it because of the resolution in terms of, like, you know, the mobility. You have more real estate, so you can kind of play with any platform, but you still have that one shot. So
you still have your master, you know, quality. And
exactly, yeah. And then you can get into, obviously, you need better lenses, the lighting, everything else comes to play, but you can also, like, you know, finagle it and tweak it to the favor.
I feel like one of the things that I've felt change, at least in the work I've been doing over the last few years, is I just feel like there's been sort of a greater legitimization of those sort of alternate delivery methods and the willingness of maybe even smaller brands to put money behind those things, where before it was like, okay, we're going to do like a broadcast buy and all our money's going into that, whereas now it's like, we don't need to spend all that money on that. Like, let's allocate, you know, extra money to production, and we're going to just predominantly go Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And so I think that that's, in my experience at least, shifted those productions, because now all the resources that we're getting allocated to distribution are able to get reallocated differently towards production and still towards, you know, different forms of distribution that's more specific and stuff. And so a project that maybe would have been super just stripped down, like you wouldn't have had anything because we just don't have that much money. It's like, okay, now we can get an Alexa Mini, we can get a Movi, and we can get whatever we need because it's not $50,000 to air this thing, So I think that's a big change too.
What trips me out is when we were asked to do a Facebook live stream for a client, and we're jumping on the plane with cell phones. And as a camera guy who's packing cine lenses, batteries, double check this, that, lists, carnets, everything, and you have a couple phones because just a backup phone and you're done because it's a Facebook Live, and it's like, do I have everything? Yeah, okay, cool, all right. And then spectacles again with the Snapchat is like, I just think like any camera is a camera. Respect it, learn it, and just dive into it. So
actually, you touched on a couple things I want to evolve into a little bit more. You said, respect it, like respect all these different levels of cameras. And Nicholas, you mentioned, it's a little bit heartbreaking to see that people watch our footage that we spent so long creating when they're looking at like standard def, on a phone. So, as creators, and a lot of you or all of you have camera backgrounds in some way or another, how do you, get that feeling of, well, my visual intent is still there? Like what's something that you hold dear to your heart that you make sure, every product, even if it's a phone shot that you're doing, what is it that you look for out of that shot?
I'm all about realness and organicness. I don't like the plastic, like in terms of whatever. So I mean, if it's a GoPro shot, a more fisheye and wide, just make it look sick. Like, to be honest, like make it look sick. But yeah, it's just make it look like real, organic, and like, damn, okay, and then digest it, and that's it. Move on, do the next, and then whether that's Red or Snapchat or even like spectacles too, like the POV of somebody, just just make it look cool. Like it's like fluidity almost.
Yeah, I feel like for me, there's an aspect of just like tonality to an image that, for the most part, like you lose some of that in compression and stuff, but you may lose some sharpness, you may lose resolution, you may lose whatever else, but if you have like just a very tonally sound, like well lit, well exposed, well graded image to begin with, they can do whatever they want to it and it still looks good, and so if you're building a solid basis there's not a whole lot that they can do to totally mess it up,
And, along the same lines, I'd agree with all of this. Whatever the edit ends up being, or whatever, the visual narrative that supports the story ends up on screen, again, going back to like consumers' expectations are just going up and up and up as technology gets better because this is more available to more productions. It's really just like every shot, like you really just want to get the right tool in. So does it have to be an anamorphic lens at 8K resolution? There's some shots that will look amazing that way. There's other shots that just a GoPro buried in the snow in the right place, for the story will look amazing. So it's really just the consumer kind of expects you to have everything, GoPros, drones, along with amazing looking cinema quality images. So it's really just like, what's the best tool, to tell the story, and how do I get the shot with that? And at least keep, like the arrangement of what you're putting on screen, motivated, instead of just, we have this new tool, let's just use it for every type of shot.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really, really important thought there, that it's the tool to tell the story, right? No matter what tool it is. There's so many different types of tools out there. So to go into a little bit deeper of a couple of projects that I saw of each of yours, Nicholas, I wanted to touch on the Red Bull project, the chain reaction that you did. And Abel did a blog about it about a year ago that was really interesting. I wanted to hear a little bit more from your perspective about how did you manage to complete that process?
Well, the chain reaction project, for some of you that aren't familiar, it was a project that was put out online. There was no ad buy around it. It was purely an editorial piece. And it followed the narrative of the Red Bull Air Force, one of the most talented, aerial acrobats, stuntmen that are out there. So wingsuits, parachutes, stunt planes, backflipping helicopters, all the
usual.
Yeah, all the fun stuff that guys like us get to work with day in, day out. And the whole narrative behind it is they wanted to do every single athletic feat in one series. And this piece was unique because we partnered with a couple external brands with this as well. So the idea started with the editorial of, we're going to do every single aerial thing in a sequence and prove that it could all be done at once. But we're going to integrate a car into it. We're going to integrate, a POV camera that, keeps track of the statistics throughout the piece. So when it came down to how are we going to establish what this looks like, in the same way that we're talking, you have to be a little bit different. You have to kind of, ring your bell to impress people these days with just doing something different. And so without getting too granular, we shot anamorphic lenses with a full 16:9 sensor. So you got, a very wide image that's close to 3:1 instead of 2:40. Again, breaking the format as a way of, commanding the respect of, hey, this is going to be a little bit different.
Right, very epic wide image.
Exactly. And, we had some great support from the other brands on it, but it still came down to the support of, what's the story and how do we make it great? And when it came down to all the location scouting, we had big, wide, beautiful, Utah to shoot. It had snowed the week before, so you had the white snow, the red rocks, big open skies, and you wanted, just those small little characters going through this vast vista, and that really the visuals that we put together for that supported the idea of these gigantic environments. And it was, it's a blessing to get to shoot any type of amazing environment like that. But we were happy that, because we were working outside of the limitations of, TV and a traditional ad buy, we were able to work with a different format because of that.
Yeah, more creative freedom in some ways, right?
Yeah, it just opens up the toolbox so that, nerds like us can go, hey, how are we going to do this, and how are we going to make it different, and how are we going to make it memorable and awesome so that it has, artistic merit, it has, merit to the story, and we're not just doing it to look different, we're doing it because there's a reason to, and we have the ability to with online distribution.
You guys should definitely check out that series. And was there a moment there where you thought, okay, how are we going to do this, that project?
Yeah, pretty much until we posted it on YouTube. But yeah, it's just like anything. There's always challenges in production, whether big or small. It's always stuff you have to get over. And that one was particularly close to my heart just because of what it took to pull off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful. I love the flares, and there's a lot of sunset shots that you got. It's a really nice job.
That one's a great example, too, though, of you have all this dragon, anamorphic, A-cam stuff on shot overs, but you're cutting in with action cams and stuff, but you don't ever think about it because it's just done in a way that makes sense for the story. And I feel like it's that your images are tonally consistent in a way that you don't really feel the change super hard, and it just works out really well. I feel like people sometimes get really scared of mixing stuff like that almost, and it's if you do it in a way that makes sense, it just people don't think about it. And that piece really, you go back and forth all the time, and I've never really thought about it too much.
And actually, before we move on from that project, just thinking about, how do you get the budget for that type of project? So those brands that were involved, were they, part of that funding, or do you keep it strictly as a Red Bull project?
I mean, it's strictly a Red Bull project. It's an editorial piece, and we do have support from other brands, but, like everyone up here, regardless of if you have a large budget or a shoestring, everyone up here is trying to stretch a dollar as much as we could. And, we're very proud of how it looked and how we executed it. But, a lot of it was just pre-production with myself, a producer, and a location scout to figure it out. So you can really say, okay, what are the hard-to-acquire tools on this job, a helicopter and a shot over, and then what, can we figure out creative ways to get around so that we don't just have the whole truck with everything there. We really get to focus on, what are those specific shots and what does that support for the story, because almost more so these days, money is always, the resources to make something are important, but it's the time too, and it's the time with good light, it's the time with the talent, and especially in sports, you don't have unlimited takes with an actor. You have, we did it once, did you get it? Please don't ask me to do that again.
Shelf life. It's all about shelf life. Yeah.
Chris, I was going to ask you, I checked out your site as well, and it seems like you're just constantly producing content.
Every single day. Last night, the parties and all that fun stuff, still went to the hotel room and cut some stuff. And
I saw you did a project even on your way to NAB, right?
Yeah, flights actually are the best, to be honest with you. I don't know about you guys, but flights are no Wi-Fi zone. I mean, sure, there's Wi-Fi on board as well, but we try not to buy into it because it's just 6 hours of nothingness and dive in, hack away, maybe catch a movie too because it's moving so quickly. But Yeah, I'm surprised I don't have an export going on right now, like in the back, because that's what I usually do. We take again a master meat and potato hero video and just like make so much like weeks or weekly, daily or weekly or monthly content, whatever you want to do for any client. So there's always like a Apple save. It's running in the background. Okay, let's do some other work, or
Right,
yeah,
exactly. What's a project that you did recently that you'd say you're really proud of for very reasons?
Oh man. The Mountain Dew one was pretty cool. I know, sorry, Red Bull. Red Bull's also one of our clients as well. So I'm getting wrapped up here.
So tell us about that. Why does that project stand out to you?
It was cinemagraphs for the Breckenridge stop of the Dew Tour. And what cinemagraphs are, again, you can get into a whole other realm with creativity. It's a snowboard event. So world's best skiers and snowboarders, slope style and big air. And it's essentially like what a cinemagraph is. It's just a constant loop with a motion aspect, but with a still aspect. So if there's a locked off shot as a dude is hitting the ramp, does a triple cork, whatever you want to do, does the trick, and it's just a constant loop of his sequence. And he's just constantly, it's just a repetitive thing, but it's a fluid motion. So that was one of the cool things because we just got really creative. So we just, like, one of them was Danny Davis, a pro snowboarder. He was just chilling like that, like so hyped. And then the background was just the ski lift, just looping infinite. And with that, like, it's just a cool creative concept because you're not trying, like, you're getting the shot, but it wasn't like, okay, let's do that again, let's do that again, let's do that again. It's just how can we impact on a thumb stopping content piece that someone's like, oh damn. And the comments that we received in that and the feedback is just like, wait, what? I thought this was a video, I thought this was a photo. So it's just, it's, again, you can also pull from other avenues as well. It's not just like getting the triple cork on, backcountry. So it's
when
just,
you see that reaction, you get inspired by that
yeah.
as well.
And then personally, it was like dealing with the altitude, the negative temps, and literally on the side of a mountain working with the world's best skiers and snowboarders. Like, that's, for me, that's it. Even though I was like freezing, shaking, and like actually not even shaking because it was just frozen. But it's just like, yeah. That was one of the coolest things. Red Bull again these guys are like top notch for just simple. We're in Toronto because one of our offices is located there, and it was to promote a breakdancing competition, just a weekend thing, nothing too crazy. And our team just went to Toronto's, like, I think it was 12 of the hottest locations in Toronto over like an 8-hour period, and we shot him doing his routine. And every time we felt that it's needed, or there was a hard like beat in his dance or something, when he landed after doing a backflip, we cut to another spot. So it was like, again, transitioning through the whole city with all these like all these hotspots with the creative element. Again, it was a thumb stopping content. So
you had a short turnaround for that job.
Yeah, there was oh geez, it was like what, 2 days? Yeah, it was like 24 hours. But it's like, that's the thing. It's like, again, studio in a bag, nimble team, versatile, like creative idea. Let's execute it now to get it out for Friday before the event starts on Saturday. It's not last minute thinking. It's just pin it, plate it, do it. Wow. And like sometimes you really kill it, sometimes you don't. But you try to get as close as you can, and majority of the time you will get 80% there. So yeah.
That's cool. Evan, how about you? I watched a piece on your site, the Oh Wonder All We Do project that you did. And I wanted to touch on that one because it sounds like you collaborated with different DPs from all over the country, right?
Yeah, all over the world. That one was a really interesting one. And it was really cool because basically the premise of it was that there's this band who they're based out of England, but they're really big, the whole music industry, branded content thing. They're like online big band sort of thing, totally indie, but they were working on this project for a song where they wanted to make a narrative piece about what it means to be a human in the context of the whole world. And so they sort of put out a open call to filmmakers around the world. And they got, a couple hundred submissions and ended up picking 10 and got to be one of the 10, which was really cool. It was actually my producer, Dennis, sent my reel in and I didn't know. And so then I found out that we had this thing. And so he kind of threw me in on that. But it was cool. So we got a pitch, and it was cool because they basically gave us a ton of rope to do whatever we want. That the idea was like, we just want you to do your thing, identify people, tell their story how you want, and then send it in to us. And it was super format flexible, where it's like some people were doing iPhones and some people were doing, DSLRs. To we had Red Dragon and Lomo Anamorphics, and so it's all these mixed formats and all around the world. And it was a really cool project to just get to be a part of. And it's not the most impressive thing that I've ever done, like visually, because it was just super doc style, like walking into someone's life, and we weren't lighting anything. We weren't, we just sort of had to do what we could. But I think just the narrative of the conversation we were able to have was really powerful in a way that makes it really one of my favorite things that I got to do last year. And it's really cool because, I don't know, like 6 million people have watched it or something, and that's always just a cool moment whenever people actually watch something and you get to see lots and lots of positive comments and stuff. But yeah, it was definitely a different project. It was funny too because they were like, we just want you to like Dropbox us the files. And I was like, guys, it's not going to work. I know what you're getting from everyone else. These files, Dropbox will not like them. It will take forever. So we had to ship them a drive, but it worked out.
I have another question for all three of you that I think the audience would enjoy to hear. How do you stay on top of these trends yourselves, right? You're part of the trend, but also how do you constantly watch, right, what other people are doing? And then along with that, how do you market yourself, right? In the business that we're in, that there's so much content being created, right? How do you stay on top of the new trends as well as marketing yourself or your brand?
Well, I think everyone would agree to some point up here that you watch everything, and then when it comes to your project, you forget about all of it. You obviously want to see what everyone else is doing, because people are coming up with creative solutions for storytelling every day. There's always a new piece of gear that's being used in a different way than intended. There's always a new camera. There's always a new, I can't believe you got that camera in that place with that story with that person. So there's always this like appreciation across all production. But when it comes down to like telling your story, you really have to kind of forget about that and say like, what pieces am I going to build? What am I going to build here? A lot of that comes to technology, everything from, drone aerials, things that 5 years ago were incredibly expensive, and like the feeling that gives, now are very, very easily, acquired. I don't want to say easy, but the means to achieve them are like much more readable for everybody. So it's, what am I going to build with my story, with the limitations of resource, but also with time. And that's like a really fun thing right now, because we really have access to almost every tool on nearly every job if you really, really do want to get it, or at least that type of shot. So putting that all together, what's going to build our brand, as filmmakers, but what's also going to tell the best story. And I think that, telling the story and putting it out there through social media and just how easy it is to stay connected, to, people like up on this stage, it's becoming a lot easier. And I think that the appreciation just follows that as well.
So learning from people around you, but also still, creating your own ideas.
Yeah, I don't think anyone needs to go overly crazy, in my opinion, marketing themselves. I think that effort should instead go into their projects of creating kind of a distinct look and attention to detail and attention to story, and the followers and the appreciation for that, of filmmaking peers will follow.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, like everything what Nicholas was saying, it was, I think the biggest thing for me is I'm very like crew oriented. I got to feel that my crew, my homies or my friends, anyone is just really like killing it, but it's also the environment. So we have 2 offices, one in LA and one in Toronto, and the diversity from Toronto, the work ethic in that city is like, it's such a foundation. And then I come over to LA and every second corner is like, there's like love or something's written on the wall, it's supportive. So, I mean, environment does a huge thing. For me personally, and I know our team as well, our friends, colleagues, peers, the influencers and all that stuff that we follow personally, but then there's the online presence as well. So, I mean, we have friends right now in Europe who are killing it, in Canada and, over in LA or West Coast. And it's just cool that Instagram is not only like, it's just a branded thing, it's also like a connectivity, obviously, but you can check in with your friends like super quick and be like, just get inspiration from that and then apply it to your company as well. And like I said before, working with big brands, You can take their tactics, or not to say take, but you learn, right? You apply what we can. And I mean, we did a job with the Kardashians, and it's like a lot of people were like, "Whoa, that's amazing," but then there was also other like, "Oh man, like it's not, you didn't sell out," but it was like they were bummed on it because like we're an action sports skate, that's our vibe, and that's nothing. But I mean, Shopify was the client behind that with Kylie Jenner's Kylie Cosmetics, and it was just the way Shopify, they were brought on because their servers were the only ones that could handle the traffic from Kylie's audience, and it was like just seeing how they work straight down to the under pressure to the lead up, because there was a pop-up shop video that we did for them, the whole campaign and series, and it's remarkable. And that's every day for me. That's like you mentioned, it's the backflips every day and the athletes, but it's like for us it's a real inspiration on every level. So
well, a constant challenge and constant staying on top of your toes.
Yeah, so that's how we bring it in and apply it to organicness or anything within our brand.
So is the question about following trends and self-marketing? I think that, I don't know, I feel like there's a thing where it's smart to keep your eyes open around you for inspiration at all times, and sometimes that's new cool things, sometimes that's old cool things that people have forgotten about already, you know. I personally am anti-trend on a certain level, because I think that as a creative, if there's something that you really empathize with that happens to be popular, then it's great to do it. But I think that sometimes you see people who you can tell are doing things because they're popular and not because it's really like their thing, you know. Like there's certain visual aesthetics right now that are definitely hot, and there are people who do that really well, and it's a very like natural thing for them, and there are people who don't, who try to do that because it's a hot thing and it just like doesn't really work that well. And so I think that just like being very aware of like your core identity as a creative, almost, whether that's as a production company, as a brand, as an individual person, and then being able to look at everything that surrounds you and go like, okay, like what inspires me, what is the thing that we have to do, and what's the best way to tackle that. Not necessarily, you know, like, I don't know, I always feel like Vine turned into a big thing of like there was 3 jokes on Vine and everyone made the same 3 jokes over and over and over and over and over again, and it's just like I don't care about that kind of content, you know. And in filmmaking, I don't care to be the guy who like opens with the same drone shot that everyone else does and does the same everything else. Like it's really easy to sort of jump on that train, but I think it also is very easy to just get lost in the noise of trendy people at that point. And so I think that it's good to keep your eyes open and to see what people are doing and new tech and new tools, and to come here and you know, meet people and see stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like you have to understand yourself and what you're trying to say, and then just go out and do that with the people who can use it and worry less about trends. And as far as self-marketing, I just think that meeting people, making yourself valuable and putting yourself out into the world, whether that's creating something that's entertaining for people, educational to people, just something that people can latch onto. It doesn't have to be bought Facebook posts. Sometimes it's just thinking about what you're putting out into Instagram or whatever else, and you can build an audience really quickly. And I think sometimes it's just developing those relationships and then not pushing into them too hard, too fast. You know, there's people who I got connected to on Instagram 4 years ago who are calling me to DP stuff for them now, you know, and it's just sort of like that slow burn of seeing each other's stuff and being in the same space and waiting for someone to go like, they have a thing and they're like, oh, you're the person we need for that, instead of immediately being like, hey, I got connected to, you know, so-and-so, like, we need to do something for Mountain Dew right now, you know. And I think that sometimes you force that and it just makes it really weird.
Yeah, you touched on a good point there, staying authentic to, you know, who you are. And I think all 3 of you obviously do that very well and have followers and create a brand that way, you know, of yourself. So we only have a few minutes here. I just want to see if anyone in the audience had a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you guys have any advice or strategy on selling clients and brands on sort of not the obvious put your logo in the first 5 seconds sort of deal, just sort of selling them on branded content, building stories about branded content? Is there any advice you guys have? So the question for anyone on the stream is that how do you sort of go about selling clients on content that is not so brand heavy and heavy-handed on the sale?
You're good, Evan. You're good.
I have a podcast. I know how you got to do this.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and every every client has a different, sensitivity to it. If you're working with an agency layer, they have their ideas of what they want to do as well. So, to take a very specific question and broaden it out, essentially it's showing references and showing examples of content that doesn't have that bad shot in the first 5 seconds, or something that doesn't have that 10-second logo bumper on both sides, and saying that hey, you don't need this anymore. Here's example of other content that doesn't have this, and look at the engagement it gets. You have, hopefully you'd find some content that has, lots of views, or has been shared lots of places, or has, even editorial write-ups and press about it. I think the best idea, still year after year, is show me a reference of where it's worked this way and sell me on that, because, otherwise, you're saying things that you can't really, qualify of oh, people are smarter than that. They don't want to be marketed to. They're going to make that association. I think you still have to find some way to show that well, this content is popular and it works without this.
Yeah, and I think that in my experience, especially when you're dealing with smaller or newer brands, that can be a harder sell sometimes, because I feel like it probably comes down to every dollar is so valuable that if they feel like they're spending a lot of money on something that doesn't have a super measurable ROI, that's a distinct, this is what we're trying to sell and this is why, it can be a scary thing for them. But I think that showing references, just communicating really well and being transparent about stuff, showing other places that it's worked. And in my experience, sometimes it's just having done a project like that and then being able to use it as a case study for someone else, which for us early on with direct-to-client stuff was okay, we're going to take this brand that maybe doesn't really have the resources and whatever to do what we want to do, but we're just going to do it, and then we're going to take it to the next guy and be look, it worked, and then it makes it a way easier conversation. Whereas the first time, it's really hard to sell people on something you've never done, especially, and so if you're well, Red Bull does it, and they make a lot of money, and they're going to be yeah, well, we're not Red Bull, but when you can be okay, well, we did it with this person, and it worked really well. We did a Kickstarter campaign that wasn't an imitation of the Dollar Shave Club video, and it did just fine. We don't have to have crazy stuff happening on a long movie take, because people just get tied to these ideas, and you have to just sort of break that mindset for them and open their eyes to something else, and just be transparent. This is your goal, this is how this accomplishes your goal better than what you're trying to do. And sometimes maybe it is just the hard sell, sometimes that is the thing to do. And so I think not tying ourselves so much well, this has to be artistic and have my integrity of my storytelling, and it's maybe it just needs to be a product shot of a Burton snowboard or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it every scenario is different. You guys just pretty much summed it up. I had something and I completely, I
put Chris to sleep.
No, I was deep in thought.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they nailed it.
Yeah, you're good.
I had something. I'll follow up with later. Don't worry. I'm good.
All right, anyone else? We probably have time for one more question. Any other takers? Yeah.
To crack into it type of thing, or?
Are you asking about to get hired by a client or to get hired by a production company?
So how do you get out there in front of that client?
And it's funny, it came back to me as the last question, it's all about relationships. It's all about trust. It's about putting out, if there's NAB parties, because we're here and they're serving booze or beer, go and have a beer with them because it's more casual. That's a perfect door open. It's perfect.
And be a normal person.
Yeah, and just don't try too hard. Just be yourself. You'll find your spot. But for your question, Ryan, was honestly, I shot so much free stuff, and I hate to say this online and everything in broadcast, but it's if you want to go do something, then just go into that world. So I really wanted to go to LA, and because I grew up in that skate world, and I was like, you know what, like I want to do it, sure. I grew up with it, and then I'm here like now, like it's a dream every single day, and now that powers me throughout, the future projects coming along the way. So if, like, I mean, I was in Toronto, like the least action sport world, like it's hockey, it's automotive. Yeah, so you're the exact, like, it's just...
Dude, hockey's an action sport, though.
I mean, yeah, it is, but I was more,
more action.
My action sport is, like, that's like, it's a...
Not enough jumping involved.
Yeah, exactly, not enough risk, not enough corks and spins. But it's like, just shoot whatever you want to shoot and just promote yourself in that way, and just, I mean, if you want to fake it till you make it, like, it could be as easy as that. But the other thing is, the side is, you have to have the portfolio, you have to have the trust, the responsibility, you have to have, it's a whole package deal, but you also have to put yourself out there as well. You have to knock on those doors. I mean, nobody told me about DC shoes. I had to go find it myself and create those relationships, or Mountain Dew, or even Red Bull as well. Like, I was shaking when I first was like, hey, like, knocked on the door, and I was like whatever. But it's like, I put myself out there, I did a few projects, and I was willing. That's it. So it's honestly, it's everything.
Yeah, and I think that sort of on that note too, it's like, make good work and then make connections with people, and you need both of those things. But at the end of the day, like, being connected to people, and sometimes it's like a weird string of connections, is the most valuable thing, because at the end of the day, like, the director is going to call the guy that he knows and likes, not necessarily just the best reel that he pulls up on Vimeo. And so I think sometimes there's this feeling of like, well, I don't have like a shot over, and I don't have a this, and I don't have a that, and so I'm never going to get called to do this. But sometimes it's like, I mean, you look at Johnny Mass or someone who like started out making like scooter videos with his iPhone, and just like made friends and got better gear, and made friends and got better gear, and started shooting for Monster and whatever else. And it's like, it feels like a huge gap when you're on that side of it, but then like being here, and certainly not on the end or the pinnacle of it, it's like you look back and it's just a lot of really small victories. And maybe it's, oh, well, I found this brand that no one had ever heard of, that didn't have any money, but I shot this thing and it was good, and I took it to the next little brand no one had ever heard of, and like that brand introduced me to this guy who's a creative director who knew this guy who then, it's this weird chain. And it's just like being faithful in that, walking forward, making the best thing you can, and like being the best relational person you can in that situation, that like leads to getting called to do some crazy big thing.
And don't limit yourself to, if you want to be a cameraman that shoots action sports or adventure sports. At first, all of us were wearing every single hat. So make yourself, indispensable on set, so that if they are covered with cameras, which they will be, I can help with audio, I can do GoPros, make friends with the director, try to figure out, like what story he's telling, so you can like collaborate, with him or a producer, even PA work, it's just like everything. You just get a foot in the door, you empathize with all the roles on set, and, you just start working your way up. And that's a great way too to figure out, like, what do I really want to do? I want to do camera, but I could get on really big gigs doing audio, and then make friends with camera, and then jump over. There's no linear way that this goes.
Yeah, no rule book.
Absolutely.
And I've been following Nicholas and then Evan myself. This is the first time we personally met, but I've been following them both online for a little while, and it could be as easy as that. Follow and comment. I mean, if you're in Paris and you're in wherever, and it's like, hey, I'm here too, actually, and it could link up that you're actually in the same city, or it could just say, wow, that was a really cool shot. Send an emoji, like, done. Like, you know what I mean? Shoot some tacos their way.
Thank you very much, panelists, for that. I was going to say one last thought. The best piece of advice that I was given that I still think of all the time is create, create, create. Just to give you a short answer. Thank you so much to my panelists for joining me today. This was a great
Thank you.
Time with you. Thank you for watching.